Good to see everybody. This morning we'll be in lesson 13, which is our last lesson in this series. Most of you are probably glad of it. We'll be moving on to the book of James. Brother Steve Stubblefield will be doing the teaching in that class. He's a good teacher anyway, and I'm sure we'll get a lot out of that. I want to tell you a little thing. It's been a lot of years because my boys have been out of high school for 22 years anyway, maybe 23, and it was 3 years before that. So I guess about 25 years ago, the Coach Campbell, the head football coach here at McMinnville, asked me if I would be an assistant coach for the junior high. Well, I thought, how hard can that be? Well, it ended up being pretty hard. And I started out, and of course I worked real hard in nursery business during the day, loading trucks and all that, and I'm just exhausted when I got there, and I thought, why on earth did I ever do this? But you know what? It's very similar to this. When I first started this, I thought, boy, they could have got somebody a whole lot better than me. I don't know. And I told them I'd do it now, and I'll just have to do the best I can do. But in that football, when we got down to game 3, game 4, game 5, game 6, game 7, and then when we went into game 8, that was our last game over here at the high school football field. And I never will forget on the sidelines that I felt like the complete opposite from when I started. So when I first started, I thought, oh, brother. And I did not want to teach this class. I honestly felt like they could have gotten somebody quite a bit better than me, which wouldn't be hard to do. But so I'm looking at them boys out there playing, and it occurred to me that next week when I get off from work, I'm not coming over here. I'm not going to be doing that anymore. So I'm glad to have taught this class. I hope you've learned something. I know I did. There's just little bits and pieces here and there that's put into what I originally knew that strengthened what I knew, and I hope it had that same effect on you folks. Steve is out of town today. Him and Jill are down in Florida, and I'm got one other thing to tell you. I usually get up real early in the morning on Sunday, and I review this lesson. And I've already got all my notes and everything, and I go down through it just to familiarize myself. And I even add some more notes, and I kept seeing these wet places on my book, and I thought, my nose isn't running, is it? And then I would go to the next page, and it wouldn't be long before I'd put my hand down, and there'd be another wet spot, and I thought, I looked up to see if the roof was leaking. Come to find out, it's where I had a shower, and this bandage right here had gotten water in it, so every time I pushed it down, it's like a sponge. So that's real interesting, isn't it? I'm sorry. Anyway, if you have your book, let's turn to page 57. This is lesson 13, as I said before. Just a really, really, really brief review as we've gone through these series of lessons on stewardship. We've talked about that right off the bat, that the earth is the Lord's, and that we are not our own. God created us, and we're His, and He's concerned about what we do and how we live and wants us to join Him. And we talked about stewardship of our time. You know, time is, you can't see it, but it's there, and we all have a limited amount of it. So it's important to use our time in a way that will not only benefit others, but will help us to spread the word about Christ. We all have varying talents, and it's important in stewardship for us to make sure that we utilize carefully those talents that we've received and that God's given us. Some people have very little talent, and then as they go on, they find something that interests them, and they work hard at it, and then all of a sudden they get really good at it. So, we have talents that God gives us. And the souls of people are in our hands. And it's our job to make sure that, given every opportunity, that we spread the gospel, to be a friend. Start out with being good to them, being a friend. Then invite them to church and try to work in a study session with them to help them to understand what the Bible really says. I watched a video by B.J. Clark, and I'm sure most of you know who he is. I saw him coming here sometime soon, if I'm not mistaken, but he's a really good preacher, great big guy, and he's on GBN's Turning Point or something like that. And I heard him presenting a lesson out in a big barn. It was a gospel meeting in this huge wooden building, and I'm not sure exactly where he was at, but he made the statement that when he was about 24, 25, 26 years old, when he got out of college, and I'm pretty sure he went to Freed-Hardeman, but when he got out of college and got his first preaching job, he decided one day he felt real good about things and how things were going, and he was happy, and I decided to go out and see if I couldn't spread the word to somebody. And he's walking through the town, kind of a rural town, and he's walking through there. It was in Alabama. And he saw this older gentleman sitting on a porch. And as he got by there, he looked up at him, and he waved, and the older gentleman waved at him, and he said, "Son, if you ain't got nothing better to do, come on up here and talk to me." And, it's like he wanted somebody to visit with him, just to sit down and have somebody to talk to. So he went up there. And the subject of church came up, and he said, I got that I've had that figured out a long time. And he said, I'm happy with where I'm at. I guess he could sense that BJ was trying to stir up a conversation. And he said, where do you go to church? And it was a denominational church. And he said, so you believe the Bible is the truth? And he said, son, there ain't a word in it that's not true. And he said, and if it says it, it's the truth. Well, we all believe that, don't we? So what he did was, I forget what verse it was, but it was a very relevant verse and very convincing verse. And the denomination he was a part of did not consider baptism to be the main thing that has to be done to come in contact with Christ's blood. And so he said, can I get you to do something? And he said, what? And he said, could I get you to read this? Just read it back to me. He said, I like reading the Bible, don't you? And he said, oh, I love reading the Bible. And he read somewhere in the Bible, and it was one of the verses about belief and confess and repent and baptism. And he read that, and he said, do you believe that's true, yes or no? And he goes, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get me to buy into this baptism thing. And young fella, I've gone too far in life to change now. He said, the best thing for you to do is get off my porch. And he said when he went off, he stopped and sat on the side of the road and cried because he knew that man would never change. We run into people like that. We have preconceived notions. We have things we were raised around. And, there are people that I don't care what happens, they're going to be Vanderbilt fans until they die. That's okay. There's people that are in churches, denominational churches, that there's things that you can prove to them that are wrong, and it don't matter. It's where my daddy went. It's where my mama went. It's where my granddaddy went. It's where I'm going. It's good enough for them. It's good enough for me. The only thing that can counter that kind of attitude on our behalf to talk to them is knowledge. And being responsible for taking advantage of the opportunities that we have to teach them the things that are right. First off, we have to do is we have to know what is right. I've got a session coming up down at the jail down here, and I guess they, after reading today's paper, I guess they're going to be loaded now. It's about 45 or 60 or something people that got arrested for drugs. But I'm going to be working with somebody else that's going to lead the song leading and that kind of stuff. And I look forward to it, but I'm not going to get complicated with them. Number one is I'm not a person that is able to do much talking of getting complicated, but I'm going to speak the very basics of them. And I'm not going to get into nothing deep and heavy. I'm just going to say, you can be the most unlearned person in the world. What is the thing that we have to know absolutely? So what does somebody outside of Christ have to know to be able to be put into Christ? What do they have to be able to know? Do they have to have a PhD? No. They don't even have to have finished high school. They don't even have to have finished grammar school. But if they believe that Christ died for their sins, and what he went through and the words that he states, if that convicts them, and in their heart they are sorry and they repent and they confess their sins and they want to be baptized, that's all they got to have. Now, God expects them to grow from that point forward. But I look forward to doing that. I went down with Brother Bost and Tommy Savage, and Tommy led the song leading, and Karen suggested I go with them just to see how they do it. And I was real surprised at how attentive those most of them young men were. I mean, there was some that never even got up out of bed. There's some of them that sat in their bed reading the book. But there was about 30 to 35 of them was standing there holding those bars, listening intently. If I had time, I'd tell you a story about a letter that Karen got from somebody that had been in a correspondence situation. It was a long time before I started going here. And he got his instruction down here at the jail. And I think it's 7 or 8 years later, she gets a letter from this guy, and he's telling her what a blessing that was to him, and just about the time he was convinced that he needed to be baptized, he got shipped off to Lewisburg. So he asked around down there, and finally he got somebody from the Lewisburg Church of Christ or something, some name, I don't remember exactly. But they started studying with him, and then I think he ended up getting baptized. But he sent a letter to Karen, and it was saying the reason he got baptized was from what he learned in the jail ministry. And that's impressive. When I told Steve Stubblefield the name of it, he said, he was in my class. And isn't it funny how the word just finds its way? You know, sometimes, I don't care what you do, you can go out and dig a hole in the ground, and if you leave that hole there and water the hole, it ain't long for there's weeds coming up out of it. And you know, you would think that weeds, seed got blown in there, and that's possible. For the most part, they were there in the first place from a long time ago. They just needed the sunlight and the water. So he just needed an opportunity to obey the gospel. So the souls of men if nothing else, we've studied about finances, we've studied about all kinds of things, but the souls of men is the most important thing that we have a responsibility to address. And you may not be a gospel preacher. You may not be like me. You may not be very smart. But you can do something. And I encourage you to do that. Because of men like this man, and I won't say his name because I'm not sure I can remember it, but he heard and he observed and he obeyed. And God was pleased with him, and I can guarantee you he's pleased with the one that he heard that taught him what he needed to know. But anyway, as one of my school teachers used to say, meanwhile back on the farm, who was that? Was that Coach Alsop? Meanwhile back on the farm. But anyway, so we're going to be talking about dedication of possessions to building the kingdom of God. And our aim today is to encourage each of us to deliberately, to dedicate completely and unreservedly the material possessions that come under our control to the building up of Christ's kingdom on earth. Now, we already know that we're to do that, and we already know that once we do that, what's God's part going to be? He's going to bless us back for it. If you look at it from the perspective of He knows what we need. You know, people say, yeah, well, I prayed, but I know He's going to do just what I need. He'll do that after you give too. The Christian attitude, let's read our memory verse, 2 Corinthians chapter 9. 2 Corinthians chapter 9. I meant to do this before I got here. Verse 8. Well, and God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that ye always having all sufficiency in all things may abound to every good work. In a nutshell, you are not going to be in want for doing good to others. And I hope that we've learned in this class that when we talk about riches and wealth, it doesn't mean you have to have $15 million to be a wealthy person. If you don't have many bills and you got a chunk of money sitting there, you're wealthy. Most people never get out of debt. And if you're poor and don't have much, you can still be satisfied, do things that will satisfy God. I highlighted under Christian attitude toward wealth, I highlighted number 8, section A, the renunciation of trust in wealth, and I underlined that twice. The renunciation of trust in wealth is vital to spiritual growth. And now notice what right under that it says, this is not renunciation of wealth itself. It's a renunciation of trusting in wealth. Do you trust in God to take care of you? If you do, then you're doing it right. The person that doesn't have much can also give what he can, and he will be blessed by God as well. Monastic views of poverty were unknown to Christ and the apostles. Seeking to avoid pairs of wealth by voluntarily embracing poverty is no solution to life's problems. You know, the idea of getting away from sin and living in a life of poverty like the monks do. Although the dedication is admirable, but if you disassociate yourself, and instead of using wealth, I'm just going to use money. If you disassociate yourself from wealth, from money or wealth, or the pursuit of wealth, then that's just as bad as the person that trusts in wealth and trusts in that, and he doesn't trust God to take care of him if he parts with a little bit of that wealth. So it's just the exact opposite of what that situation is. Now, one reason about it, and I hadn't really thought about it until just now, but if a person removes themselves and puts themselves into strict poverty, they don't buy anything. They dress so modestly and cheap that, you know, they don't go anywhere and do anything. They pray all the time. That's great. But not taking advantage of the opportunity to earn income, what is that shorting in what we've been talking about? That's shorting their ability to help others. It's like if David is in a bad way and I'm sitting over here and I don't work because I'm afraid to earn anything. I just want to stay poor, and that way I know wealth's not going to get me. Well, I'm not able to help David for the simple reason I don't have anything. So it's just as bad to go from one extreme as it is to the other. At least in my views it is. Anybody else disagree with that? Of course, we've all heard 1 Timothy 6, verse 10, the love of money is a root of all evil. This author jumps back from New King James and King James and Revised Standard. But the love of money, not having money, the love of money. These are people that have trusted in their wealth. 1 Timothy 6:17, in Proverbs 11:28, he that trusts in his riches shall fall. It's a shame that, and I told you this one time before, but it made such a lasting impression on me, and it just told me just exactly what I don't want to be. I told you before about me stopping to take something back at a department store in Franklin when I was doing some landscape work out there. And it was like, if it wasn't Christmas Eve, it was the night before Christmas Eve. But anyway, I went in there, and the man that owned the condominiums that we were doing, huge, multi-million dollar setup, I seen him in there, and I started to say, "Hey, Ken," you know, but I thought, no, he don't have time to mess with me. He might not even remember me anyway. He had a grocery cart. No, he had one of those baskets, and he is literally just walking around going, just anything that was female related, he was throwing it in there. Now, the fact that it's right at Christmas told me everything I needed to know about what he's doing. He has put that off, and now he's got to fulfill a obligation very hastily. He's not doing that out of love. He's doing it out of, well, I guess I'll have to, because she's going to gripe if I don't get her something. But he didn't give any more thought to that than we do stepping on grass. And I never will forget. I hope I don't ever get like that. Because I got my own faults, but doing it like that's not one of them. Christ would have us to renounce wealth itself only as it might interfere with discipleship. Now, I told you that I was for several times I didn't make key investments that I could have that would have made huge returns, but I was afraid of it. And sometimes I'm sorry that I didn't do that because I didn't understand all the good that I could do with it. Of course, I might have lost everything I had too, and that's probably what motivated me the most. The utilization of wealth to provide personal and family necessities is required. God knows we have things that we have to do. He doesn't want our kids so that we can give to somebody else. He doesn't want our kids to be walking around with no shoes on. I mean, he understands we have needs, and he wants to bless us accordingly. But he just doesn't want us to forget those that don't have. And when we do that, we will have. We may not have $1 billion, but he's not going to a pressed down measure. He's not going to let us suffer for that. You want to say something? Three key words in what she just read, and she was talking about 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 13, and I'll read it to you. You've got a delightful, slight voice, and people can't hear you. It says, "For I mean not that other men be eased, and you be burdened." That's not what he's talking about. If I got a sack full of sandwiches and I get hungry too, what good does it do me to give somebody that don't have any sandwiches all the sandwiches, and now I don't have any sandwiches? Nothing's accomplished. We just swap poverty. So, and it says, "But by an equality, that now at this time your abundance may be a supply for their want, that their abundance also may be a supply for your want, that there may be equality." So abundance, equality, and burdened, I think are three key issues here. And that's a good point, and I appreciate it. I think most of us are, if the truth be told, and sometimes when I say things, you can read that that's the way I think and the way I've thought, but a lot of people, they're afraid of being poor. I don't have to be wealthy, but I sure don't want to be poor. Well, you know what? I trust that God will never let me be poor. Now, I didn't say I trust that God will give me great wealth, but I trust that my needs will be met. And it's easy to go on through life when we trust in God to satisfy our needs. So utilization of wealth to provide personal and family necessities is required. These hands have, I'm getting where I can't hardly see. These hands have ministered unto my necessities and to them that were with me. That's Acts chapter 20, verse 8. We've all heard this before. If any would not work, neither should he eat. Now, I hate to tell you this, but seeing as how about 1/3 of our country is on subsidies, food subsidies, income subsidies, I don't know why all that ever got started, but I'll tell you what it's done. Do any of you know who Charlie Kirk is? He used to be on Fox News. He did not go to college. He's just super intellectual. And he said he went there for a while, and he said, I didn't learn anything. So but over the years, he has learned a lot, and he was talking about that there was a particular race of people that he was talking about that during the civil rights movement, single parent homes or single mothers with children were at 22.1%. And he said now it is at 77.9% that don't have a husband and have children. Now, how do you expect? See, his point was that people get accustomed to being given all the time. Given. And I'm not going to do anything, but I want to be given. I have made one observation. It doesn't make me envious. It doesn't make me mad. It kind of makes me mad. You show me somebody that is on a routine food card, and I'll show you somebody that when I go to the grocery store is getting 2 carts full and I'm getting 1/3 of a cart because that's all I can afford. So there's times when if a person won't, people have to take care of themselves. The subject of widows, those that are widows indeed, they don't have a family. There's nobody to take care of them. They're members of the church. We have to step up and help those people. But if they're, I think it's 60 or something like that, but if they have a daughter or son, that responsibility needs to go to them. Our country doesn't do that. It just assumes that they need help, and the more people get that kind of help, the less likely they are to try to sustain their own livelihood. Now, this is not a political statement. It just came up here. And if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. And that's in 1 Timothy 5:8. An infidel, to be honest with you, I thought I knew the answer to that. Infidel. I always assumed that meant that somebody that was a Christian but wasn't faithful anymore. An infidel, according to the definition of Webster's, it is a person who does not believe in a religion that someone else regards as the true religion. The Muslims call us infidels because we don't believe like they do. Well, in Christianity, the same thing applies. So God doesn't think of somebody that thinks his plan he's put together for their souls and preservation of their souls and our souls is just a bunch of hooey. He doesn't think very much of that person, and the person that doesn't provide for his own is worse than that person. God gives us richly all things to enjoy in 1 Timothy 6:17. Now, as we go down through here quickly, God gives us all things to enjoy, not to despise. Christians are not required to abstain from wholesome pleasures of life in reasonable proportion when they do not conflict with service to Christ. I told Kathy one time, I said, the more I study this, the more I wonder if I should have even bought a new car. But I think God wants me to have reliable transportation, and I take care of what my assets, and I don't think that's what it means necessarily. But do I need 5 cars? Do I need a Mercedes-Benz? And if you have one, I don't mean to belittle you, because I'm not capable of having a Mercedes, but a Jaguar. And then I keep my contribution the same. Well, if I had the opportunity to do this, I should be able to do this right here, shouldn't I? I should be able to increase my giving to the work of the church if I'm able to do that. That's all it's saying here. There is a justifiable measure of personal and family enrichment in life in terms of education, culture, and health. This increases capacity to serve man and God. And also there is a justifiable measure of provision for hazards of life to avoid becoming a burden to society and a parasite. Good judgment here is essential. I don't think having a retirement program is wrong at all. I mean, it's just we don't want to all of a sudden have no money and then all of a sudden, could you let me borrow $100, knowing I'm not going to be able to pay it back. You know, I don't have anything. Too old to work. You know, he just doesn't. He doesn't want us to go overboard with that. Many conveniences of modern life can be used to free us for more time for creative work and for more useful services. In section C, the true position of material wealth. Number one, it is entrusted to us as stewards. It is for use in this world. We brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out in 1 Timothy 6:7. See, there again, we're talking about what is ours and what is not ours. We have to keep that in mind. You didn't get what you got. God give it to you. It is temporary in nature, yet by proper use here we lay up treasures in heaven. I want to get to one verse over here on the page 59, so I'm moving along pretty quickly. In contrast with temporary, perishing material wealth, the abiding realities are the things that are not seen. The things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal, and that's 2 Corinthians 4:18. There is a fine art in learning to be content with our station in life. I want you to ask yourself this morning, am I content with what I have? Do I worry about what somebody else has got that I don't have? Am I happy that God's blessed me with the little or the lot that I have? 1 Timothy 6:8, it says, having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. When you get right down to it, if a foreign army moved into our country and they're on just about every street corner, what is the one thing that you absolutely have got to have? Food and water. And somewhere to hide, I guess. Although I wouldn't hide, but that's really all that we can expect out of this life. But you know what? That's more than we had when we came into this life. We came into this life, we didn't have nothing but a squeal. I remember Jake's oldest daughter, when she was born, as soon as she was out in the air, she sounded exactly like a little squealing pig. I sat there and laughed, and Katie said, I wouldn't laugh. You're going to hurt their feelings. And I said, well, it sounds like a little squealing pig. But they were so happy for her, and we were happy for them. But that little baby now only needs food and shelter. And that's all we really need. Section B, godliness with contentment is great gain. And that's in 1 Timothy 6:6. There is not to hamper ambition properly directed. This is not to hamper ambition properly directed. We are not to be slothful in business in Romans 12:11. But we are to realize happiness can never come through love of material wealth. What did Paul learn according to Philippians 4:11 through 13? To be content. Isn't it funny how I don't remember being that way. I might have been that way. My daddy wouldn't let me be that way long. But kids today just seem like they're not content with anything. No matter what you give them, what you supply them with, they're not happy with it. But as Christians, we need to learn from Paul and Paul was content. You know, he said he's had and I'm paraphrasing, he's had a whole lot, and he's had not a whole lot. And he's learned to be content whatever the situation was. Number 6, wealth is not to be wasted. Wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread? Waste is sinful. Surely the Lord's people waste enough to go far in world evangelism. If so, we must give account. I forget which verse it was, and I should have made notes of it, but you know, there are people in our brotherhood that don't believe that we should pay a full-time preacher. They don't believe that we should be... Is that the bell? I'll declare, I heard the bell. That's the first time I've heard it since I've been up here. But I tell you what, just I want to make sure we get to section A over here of section 2. A charge to the rich. And this is very critical to understand. Paul charges the rich to do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willingly to communicate, laying up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. Everything we've talked about can be boiled down to this verse right here, or these verses. 1 Timothy 6, 18 through 19. Was that the first bell? Okay. I don't want to make it sound so simple as what I'm going to say it like, but it's sort of, it's to me, it's a whole lot like, you know, all of us have been through the drive-in window, and we put our checks or whatever in the bank, and we do our balance, and, you know, next month or next week or whenever we'll go to the bank again. In a whole lot of ways, what they're saying here, did that bell just ring? They're cheating me. I got cheated out of 2 minutes. What they're saying is, do good here, because when you do, it doesn't go in your checking account, it goes into the eternal account. And we need to remember that God's watching what we do. I've really enjoyed doing this. I'll let you get out on time. For those of you, some of you have asked me about how it went the other day at the parole hearing for the young man that I went down to see at Hartsville. He got his parole, and I'll tell you what, I think I had a hand in that, because I brought a letter that he wrote to me. And I think I read that in here, but you know, it showed character when he said, I really do need your prayers, but I want you to pray for the one that didn't get his parole, because he is really miserable and he's really down. You pray for him first. And I told that parole officer, I said, I don't know how you gauge character, but that right there is exactly the kind of thing that you need to allow him in his life to go ahead and develop. Keeping him in here 3 or 4 or 5 more years it might even reduce his character. He might even change. But to pray for somebody over praying for yourself, that's a real sign of growth to me. And he sends his lessons and stuff back, and I brought that up to that guy, and that parole officer, he was on television at live cam, and he looked at me and he said, that's an excellent point. So I'm glad I read his own letter to him. Kathy said, they're not going to let you carry that in there. I said, what are they going to do? Take this letter and make it into a fork? You know, I said, it's just a piece of paper. So he did get his parole. And I hope if the men have a very good group of people working on the jail ministry down here, but to be honest with you, the women could use some help. But last I looked, Karen's only 4 people, isn't it? So instead of having, you teach this week, you teach next week, you teach next week, you teach next week. It's you teach this week, you teach next week, you teach the next week, you teach the next week, and it's going to work about 4 of them to death. So when those opportunities come up, let's participate in it, because they have souls too. I will let you go. I'm sorry, but I have really enjoyed being in this class, and I hope that you learned a thing or two.